Thank you guys for joining us on AGA Podcast. Today we have Amanda and Martin from Dirt Capital Partners with us. I'd love to start by telling us a little bit about Dirt Capital Partners and your mission.
Sure. I'm Amanda Zakharov, and I'm our Director of Investment. Dirt Capital Partners was formed to work with farmers on long-term secure land access. So the main way we do that is kind of investing in farmland in partnership. So we are kind of trying to figure out how to help farmers actually have a pathway to ownership of that land, have that security that they can invest in infrastructure and soil health and really build up their businesses.
That's awesome. What inspired you to focus on investments in land partnership with regenerative farmers?
So Jacob Israel formed Dirt Capital about 10 years ago in kind of trying to answer that question of how do we figure out this land access issue and kind of this capital infusion of buying that land, of bringing the money to the table was really the answer, or at least one of the answers. There's so many things that we need to do. But I was personally about 10 years ago as well, when I met Jacob when he was starting it, I was getting my master's in food studies at NYU and thinking about the same question. I was and how we make our food system better. And it all goes back to the agriculture and the land and that ability to really do the work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess we're going to touch a little bit on impact. Like, how do investments in regenerative agriculture create a positive impact on the environment?
Sure, I'll take that. And I'm Martín Lemos. I'm Director of Impact and Agriculture at DIRT. I think there's long-standing evidence that there are land management practices that replenish the resources that agriculture draws from the land. And that's basically our working short version of what regenerative agriculture means, right? It's a system of processes such that, land is managed towards regeneration of resources, right? Farmers are working in balance with natural systems, to produce the food and fiber that we need without diminishing any of the other resources that we and every other living thing depends on. So a key part of that regenerative land management, sustainability and vibrancy of those systems. And that's obviously something that's been evidenced by the management practices of indigenous communities across the world. And what we've seen through those practices is a better biodiversity, more plentiful natural resources, and really the absence of those kind of like negative feedback loops in the ecosystem. So, what you see specifically regenerative ag is kind of improved soil health. I think that's really at the core of what regenerative practices mean. It's kind of being mindful of the soil biome, not trying to sterilize it and concoct the soil into something that, it's a specific formula that will yield, X, Y on this piece of property. It's really about increasing organic matter because, you're trying to feed that biome with compost or with cover crops in the form of biomass. You're trying to minimize disruptions to the soil structure, and all that's to kind of grow and foster and support that soil biology. And I think that's just leads to these knock-on effects in the ecosystem, right? You increase organic matter, you're increasing water retention, you're increasing nutrient availability, especially key nutrients, right? So you're making more soluble phosphorus, and you have organisms that are fixing nitrogen, so they're more easily taken on by plants. That leads to, stronger crops or a stronger pasture. Stronger pasture means they've got stronger animals and they're calving better, and the calves are stronger, which means predation is less. You're less worried about kind of bringing more biodiversity into your property. You're using less land, so it's easier to reserve marginal land. It's easier to protect riparian areas for wildlife. So it's these kind of like knock-on effects, this kind of feedback loop that happens from working in relationship with the land. And I think that's something that we try to work with farmers that have that ethos and are kind of tapped into that system of thinking. And it's something that obviously has, environmental impacts, but it's more broadly impacts for farmers as well, and kind of their businesses, and making those businesses more vigorous and resilient.
Would you be able to share any case studies, particularly where your investments have made an impact on farmers and the land in general?
Yeah, so we just published actually our 10-year kind of retrospective on our impact, and that has several case studies. And so welcome folks to look at that report, I mean, I think the kind of way that we've been thinking about impact at Dirt Capital is a pretty multifaceted. So looking at these 4 different themes of ecological stewardship, so the impacts on the land, farmer equity, the impact on farmer well-being and their business and the sustainability of their business, community benefits, looking at who else benefits from this farmland investment, the broader community, farmer networks, the increase in food access, and then field building, right? So looking at the ways that we're helping to advance models that are more supportive of farmers seeking land access. And, I think one of our key impacts is like number of farmers that have been able to secure land ownership. And, from our first 31 projects in our first 3 funds, we had about 10 of those projects that have exited. We've exited, meaning that the farmer now has ownership of those properties, and the remainder are still active projects in that pathway towards farmer ownership. So that's a key impact, right? That's, as Amanda said, we're trying to connect farmers with this long-term opportunity to steward land. And, I think we've had in our report one case study with a farmer named Phyllis from Dharma Lee up in New York. So they were able to secure this piece of farmland to grow their operation, their dairy operation, their organic dairy operation. And they were able also to talk through like all the changes that happened as a result of to the land as a result of that investment. Increasing numbers of bird populations, the ability to transition that acreage over to organic. And then we also had a story in there from one of our farmers in New Jersey, Hector Perez, who was able to go from, smaller acreage that he was leasing to this much larger property, was able to put in fruit trees, and has like increased his revenue by, double as a result of that access to that farmland. So, I think we view ourselves as supporting and facilitating that land access, but a lot of the impacts come from farmers themselves, right? Like they have this opportunity to invest themselves into that land, and they're already taking on these regenerative practices. They've got a really strong business that they can expand. They're already tapped into how to support the community, and so our investment is really a platform for those kind of impacts that they're able to achieve through their work.
Yeah, I would love to touch a little bit on like how the investments are structured. Maybe sharing some of the creative financial structures or partnerships that make these land investments feasible.
Sure, I'll take that. We have a lot of different ways of doing it, so it can get a little complicated, and we try to tailor each investment that we make to that specific farmer and piece of farmland, what is needed there. And the main way we do it is through purchasing the land entirely. So that's allows us to bring 100% of the value that's needed to purchase that land, and sometimes do additional construction if barns or a house needs to be added. And then we have a long-term lease with that farmer that creates clear purchase option prices in the future. So that kind of creates built-in equity in those fixed options, and it lets them know exactly how much they're going to need to purchase it from us in the future in 5 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the main way we do it, though. We also have lots of investments that are structured as joint ventures. We got a phased ownership transfer or mortgages, and really depends on the individual. And so we try to dig into the details in partnership with the farmers.
And how do you guys ensure that these structures really benefit Dirt Capital and the farmers involved?
That's a good question. Everything is a balance. We have our money comes from impact investors that care really deeply about those aspects of impact that Martín was just talking about. So that is a lot of their return and what we're looking for, but we are looking for a financial return and preserving capital as well. So we can kind of keep doing this over and over again, hopefully. So we kind of try to look at things from the bottom up and say, what is this piece of farmland reasonably going to generate in the future? From like, what is the business going to look like? Then what does that cash flow and what's the time frame to get to there? And then does that match kind of the purchase price of this land and the other funding sources that we might be able to bring in? Sometimes in order to make a deal happen, there might need to be other lower cost financing, other philanthropic grant financing, or conservation funding as well. So we try as much as possible to start with the land and build up from there to does this investment work.
I know Martin kind of touched a little bit on this, but would you be able to walk us through a typical investment deal and like from start to finish, just to give an idea of what that could look like?
Yeah, maybe I'll just share another kind of case study of a recent deal that we closed in the fall. Dodo Farms is a farm that was founded by Tope and Nee, who immigrated from Nigeria, where Nee had significant experience farming on a much larger scale. They were able to get some leased land through this Maryland matching program, but they're farming in Montgomery County outside of DC and Baltimore. But the land that they had there was, it didn't really give them any control, no security of what that term could look like. It was small and didn't have any housing. So there were a lot of things that they really wanted in kind of a forever farm and home for themselves. So they had been searching for a place. We connected with them pretty early on and had kind of some initial conversations. When they found a property they were really excited about, we got together, understood all their business, what their concerns were, what the terms needed to be, and kind of came together and said, okay, we're going to fund 100% of the purchase price. This is what the terms are going to look like. Let's go in and make an offer. That offer fell apart. We found that the seller was unwilling to sell to them for unfortunate reasons, and despite us trying to convince them, we just moved on, tried to found another second property that we were excited about, but it was an older home. So we did an inspection, came back with $100,000 worth of repairs. It just was going to be a ton of work, wasn't worth doing. So we moved on from that one too. And then finally, another month later, the perfect place came on the market that had 10 acres of fields that had been fallow with just horses on it. It had a really nice renovated house that was going to be great for them, as well as kind of a basement community space that's going to work for their business, opening out to the fields. And we kind of, since we'd been working so closely together, we were able to move really fast and say, okay, perfect, let's put it in an offer together. We had it signed up, I think, October 31st last year, with trying to close right before Christmas. And we even actually closed early so that everyone could enjoy the holidays together. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're great farmers starting to build, and we're really excited. But a lot of things can go that way of we're working with that farmer, figuring out those terms, but the real estate part is always a bit of a roller coaster. So we're kind of on that ride with our farmers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's an awesome story, just like the ups and downs of it all, but you guys really were supportive through that. So that's awesome to hear. Why is it crucial to partner with experienced and skilled farmers in regenerative agriculture to you guys? Like, why is that like a huge focus?
Yeah, I think we try to work with folks that are already practicing regenerative practices, that are bought in, that have experience kind of implementing that model and have that way of thinking. I mean, I think most investment, and particularly our investment, like we invest in farms and we therefore are investing in management, right? And I think folks that are managing regenerative agriculture practices, or farms with that kind of ethos, they're committed to being very observant, they're experimental and innovative and really responsive. And I think it's difficult to kind of invest in folks that might want to do regenerative later on, not having seen it, right? As opposed to working with folks that have, the experience of what it feels like to have that ethos, and dealing with all the variability that agriculture brings, right? Like farming is very difficult, right? And so you want to have people with that experience that know how to manage through, variable conditions, markets fluctuating, unstable climate. And I think regenerative agriculture really provides that kind of framework for folks, right? It's people that are really attuned to what their ecosystem needs, what's the right thing to do at the right time, given the conditions. And so I think we're really excited about working with farmers that already have that experience, right? And know how to manage through variability and are able to take on this investment, right? That, we feel really confident that there's such strong farmers that this new piece of land that they're going to get onto, they have the know-how, the expertise to manage it and steward it in a way that's really going to be supportive of the environmental impacts overall, but it's going to really support their business in the long term.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you guys have like strict like criteria or framework that you have to follow to select a farmer, or is it case by case basis?
We have some general guidelines. We usually try to work with farmers with, over 2 years of managing a farm experience, either their own business or, many years of kind of managing an operation, folks with proven markets, try to find folks with revenues over 200,000 a year and implementing organic regenerative practices. But those are really, guidelines. I think we're looking not just at the farmers, but the opportunity as well. So there's sometimes, we've got really strong farmers, but they haven't found the right piece of land that would work for us. And then, I think that's a little bit of how we think about it. It's not just the farmer itself, but the project and the overall opportunity. Is try to find folks that are aligned with that. So folks that have that ecological stewardship ethos, right? That have experience, managing for soil health, know how to conserve water, are really attuned to managing their animals in a way that's very healthy and humane. We are attuned to folks that have really strong businesses that are really going to benefit from just having additional acreage, or they could really take on this expansion, diversification opportunity. Farmers that have really strong markets, right? So they are really tapped into local markets and have a diversity of places their produce can go, as well as like really connected with the community, right? So not only just from like a feel-good factor, but also like knowing that they have community support, right? That they've really invested in building the folks that are around them. So we try to use this really kind of holistic approach through our impact framework to understand farmers, and Amanda obviously leads a lot of work just trying to understand the opportunity and try to make that opportunity fit for the farmer. And we try to be as innovative as possible. And so one of our impact themes, as I mentioned before, is field building. So I think we try to be as supportive and creative as possible when opportunities come. And so if there's a farmer that really meets and is aligned with our impact framework, we really go above and beyond to try to support them through if they need a land search opportunity or support, and a particular land comes on, trying to find the right fit for them that will support, their business model.
You mentioned like you obviously support them in a bunch of different ways. Do you guys ever support them in any training or development programs outside of just the initial investment to really make sure that they're successful?
Yeah, I think that again, this goes back to kind of the skilled and experienced folks. Like we work with folks that are really, really already have a solid business plan, have experience, agronomically and knowing how to manage regeneratively. I think we also work with a lot of farmers who, because of that ethos, like are willing to learn and like are looking for more and are always eager to bring in new thinking into their farms and their business and how they manage the land. So we do a lot of connection with other organizations. We try to connect them with other farmers in our network. But a lot of our support is partnership, right? So we work with farmers once they've decided on this project to work with their capital. We really work with them to try and find ways of increasing the affordability of that property long term, right? So whether that's helping with navigate, conservation easement transactions with land trusts, helping navigate, potential subdivision processes or construction enterprises, or if there's an opportunity to place renewable energy on some portion of the land to bring in some additional revenue, or there's other revenue streams that we can kind of tap into. I think that's an area where we try to partner with folks because we know that's not necessarily the expertise of farmers. Like, but on the stuff that, farmers are, that's like their bread and butter, right? Like growing things, marketing things. Like I think we find that many of our farmers are really kind of quite advanced in that. And then we'll support them every once in a while and be a, sounding board for their business plan or any big changes. But again, really strong farmers that we're trying to connect with.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. This is more of a question for kind of both of you. Could you share some of the biggest challenges that you face when investing in land or regenerative farming in general, like from both sides of it?
Yeah, I always think about this as kind of big picture, zooming out. We just need more, like more money and more people. And I think people on the investing side, we have amazing farmers. We have a really strong pipeline of farmers that we are excited to support. And our capital isn't always the solution. There's more. We need more ideas, more capital that's gonna gonna invest in all different ways, and just more people to support that work. And they kind of go hand in hand to be able to draw more people out of their maybe day jobs that they're less passionate about, like I was a couple years ago, and join the regenerative ag movement, bringing different talents and skill sets.
How do you overcome these challenges, and what opportunities do you see for the future in this overall sector of regenerative farming?
Well,
Yeah.
maybe just go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, I was just going to address what I was just the bringing more people in, and I was just going to say we need moving it out, and that kind of like day to day of every deal that we do and every drip in the bucket is kind of moving in that direction, and that's what keeps me kind of going on the when we're in the weeds.
Yeah. Did you want to touch?
Yeah, I just want to echo that. And I think, part of what we think is really important is just collaborating with other folks that are in our ecosystem of investors and capital providers. I think, and just sharing lessons learned, right? I think there's a lot that we're innovating on, and also a lot that we learn from others as well. And I think that sort of transparency about how things work, and I think like changing that dynamic of, kind of Uber competition to really collaboration, right? That this is like a kind of a systems movement wide approach, and trying to, as Amanda said, like increase the kind of capital that's available, increase opportunities for these farmers. I think another challenge is obviously that many of these farmers are still, when you're thinking about government policy, like, swimming against the current, right? And I think that's a thing that needs to change as well, right? I think there's a lot that individual farmers are shouldering that, if there was a more supportive policy, it'd be easier for us, right, to say, oh, there's going to be this payment coming in, or there's this like guaranteed support for a farmer who's doing, this kind of regenerative grazing, or this farmer that's, supporting, you know, food access in their community, right? As opposed to the current situation where there's like, oh, you might apply for a grant, it might be available, this funding may, not be continued. And I think that level of stability, which I think more conventional agriculture has benefited from, I think if there was that kind of stability for regenerative farmers, I think that, would really change the dynamic and the outlook for many of these folks.
Yeah. And I appreciate you guys like sharing all this knowledge with our members. It's all very interesting. I would love to hear like what's next for Dirt Capital Partners, and are there any new exciting projects, initiatives on the horizon for you guys?
We are currently raising our fourth fund, and we're really excited about and that it's going well, but we're in our kind of final push. Our target is 50 million, so we're really trying to bring that money to the space. We're have a big pipeline, as I mentioned, lots of great farmers, and so much of that is partnerships with other co-funders. So we have just this year or last year in this fund worked on deals with Mad Capital, with Pot Liquor Capital, Food Shed Capital. We're trying to work with Iroquois Valley on one currently. So we're really excited about that collaborative space and that field building that Martín mentioned, that we can do so much more together.
And how can listeners learn more about your work that you do and maybe get involved to support overall regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, we've got a great website, dirtpartners.com. You could read more about our work. We've got our impact report there, so you can kind of see what the impact of our investments have been over the last 10 years of investments. And then there's also a lot of materials there for potential farmers, right? Folks that are interested in financing. So how we work and ways to get in touch so that we can get the conversation going.
So this is our website, and we have a little banner up here announcing that 10-year impact report that Martín mentioned. That's an easy way to take a look at it. And you can the easiest way to get in touch with us is to go to our contact us page. We have a farmer inquiry form specifically for farmers that are looking to work with us. So this will put you straight into our pipeline, which is really helpful for me to be able to keep track and reach out. This will go right to us. If you can fill out this questionnaire briefly is fine, but we just want to get to know you and the situation a little bit so that we know how quickly we need to respond, kind of what the situation is. And you don't need to necessarily have every single one of these things checked off, as we mentioned, but it helps give us an understanding of where you're at. And then some of the criteria that we talked about are also listed on this For Farmers page. So if you wanted to take a look at that again, same thing, no need to check every single box. We'd love to meet more farmers, and it often takes years to bring a deal together. So it doesn't have to be every single one of these things right now. And please reach out before a property is even identified, because as I mentioned, real estate is a roller coaster, and we can be along for the ride together once we know that it's a good fit and we want to work together.
Yeah, I think overall, in like larger supporting of regenerative ag, as I mentioned earlier, like policy is really important. And we're kind of closing in on Farm Bill, it seems like, or if we're somewhere around there, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a moment where, there's needs to be more of a push to get, conservation, regenerative ag practices, support for small scale farmers, support for BIPOC farmers, embedded in that Farm Bill. So there's definitely a lot of room for advocacy, and organizations like National Young Farmers Coalition, and others are doing a lot of great work on that. So I think tapping into that and getting involved and sending letters and all of that advocacy work is really critical right now.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys so much for sharing all this knowledge with us. I know that we're at AGA going to continue to follow along with everything you guys are doing. Again, I appreciate you guys being on the podcast and taking the time. And we'll drop some links in the description on how to reach out to you guys, how to learn more. I'm going to share that impact report as well. So I think that's great. Thank you
So much for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.